Okay. Bismillah, alhamdulillah, wa bihi nasta'in. Assalamu alaikum and good afternoon to everybody. Let me also thank the organizers of ALPA and all the supporters of that organization for making this possible. This is my first time at ALPA gatherings, and it's a pleasure to see so many young Afghan scholars here. It truly is an amazing experience for me, being here for over 50 years and being in gatherings where maybe there were no more than one or two Afghans. And now we have a critical mass, and it's a pleasure, and congratulations to all of you for being here and carrying on. I'm going to take slightly different take, focusing on the political economy of state and also technologies of power that has made Afghanistan what a mess it is. Let me start with the period of imperial rule, at least specifically with association of name Afghanistan to a geography, starting with 1747. What was the political economy of this state like, this imperial state that is? One of the most important theories and the most elegant theories that I have come across was formulated 1,000 years ago by Yusuf Khas Hajib Balsaguni. A very elegant, very simple, but extremely relevant to modern day Afghanistan, which has to do again with political economy of state stability. He simply says, troops are needed to maintain the state, then and now. Wealth is needed to pay the troops. A prosperous people is needed to collect the wealth. And for the people to be prosperous, justice must be maintained. A very key issue indeed. And it says any of these things is lacking or missing, then the state will fall apart. Keep that in mind, that how important that theory is and why we haven't been able to, well, it's not moving, not doing anything. The slide is moving. Now it is, okay. The Muslim empires of faith obviously had two very key issues. One was to essentially claim that they are expanding and protecting Islam and Islamic domain. But the second very important thing was occasionally talked about justice. Whether justice was there or not, what was critical was that they claimed they were defenders of Islam. But in addition to that, what really made successful empires successful were these 5 other things that were really part of the technology of power of the era. The first one was Zar. The Z's are very critical in how things have happened. That is extracting wealth mostly by war, loot, and some taxation and so on and so forth. So the ones who were successful did that. Zur was the use of force. How many could you get to come to the wars for loot or for otherwise? And it was critical. The one tribesmen and others who could, that Tom referred to. The other one was Zan, strategic alliance of marriages. And of course, this is part of the problem that we're also dealing with gender issues today, that women were commoditized and also turned into weapon of political manipulations and all the rest, which is with us. The other very important thing was Zameen, land. Land was also used as a way of recruiting essentially support for the ruler by granting them land or by granting them taxation, the right of taxation to the land. And that, of course, created a very important mechanism for having power. The last but not least, which is not Z, but it's T, and that's tazwir. Tazwir is one of the critical technologies of power and has been in the region, because here you deceive people by instrumentalizing religion, instrumentalized both by the rulers and by religious leaders who are also, of course, recruited to help them do that. And this collaboration with Sufis, with others, of course, has been part of this technology of power, which one has to keep in mind. The result has been sovereignty of rulers who managed to keep people is rayat and is taba'a. These concepts are very extremely important because these are subjects without rights. They are essentially, as Tom was referring to, it is also very important. So what happened in 1880? This is the part of our political culture. What I'm emphasizing is that this political culture that produced the imperial age also continued with certain transformation and certain wiggling, as it were, but not really going away, not being changed very much. And the first one, of course, was that religion, the tazwir, continued. And of course, modern day Taliban is the worst form of that tazwir. You will come to back to that. The other thing was jihad. The concept of jihad has been also part of this tazwir by rulers in the era that since 1880, again, Abdurrahman just did not come to power on his own. He was brought into power, crowned by outsiders, and given the weapons and the money to do what he was made essentially to make it possible. One of the very interesting things about Zan, the political asylum, what do you call alliances, the marriage alliances, was slightly transformed. Those went on, but not in the same level as in the 19th century, certainly not before 1880. They created a new institution. It was called Ghulam Bachagani Darbar. Instead of marriage alliances, they essentially brought young men of powerful families as hostages, essentially, to the court and made them put them into the service of the royal court. And the implications that has not been studied very much, but it's a very important development in terms of technology of power that Afghanistan has experienced. The last, Zar-in-Zur, is very critical. Zar-in-Zur used to be by war, loot, and a whole bunch of other things. It shifted critically, that it became provided by enemies of the country, enemies of the people of Afghanistan, but the friends of the rulers. They essentially give them the money, the weapons, and all the rest to rule. And of course, that's what we know is wabastagi ba istimar. It's something that has stayed with us since 1880. And the example, I don't have a lot of time to go, but the slide shows you when UK was the provider of the means for the rulers. And in World War II, a new phenomenon happened. Until World War II, essentially UK was the provider. After World War II, something new happened in the world political scene, and that's empires by invitation and empires by trust, which are these empires are based on making other countries dependent on the ones who provide. And of course, the best example is this country where I live. And of course, we saw the impact of that recently by what President Trump did. You pull the plug, everybody screams. And you want to do whatever you want to do, essentially, because the world has become dependent. And you can manipulate it as you wish. And then USSR, of course, the Cold War had two sides, a bipolar world. Some were dependent on the USSR, some on USA and the European West, and so on and so forth. And then, of course, we have the proxy war era, where you find, the 1980s is not just USSR, also Mujahideen became dependent. The jihad was essentially sidetracked by US and Arabia and others. Then the proxy wars of the 1990s, and then the last part, of course, US intervention for 20 years. And the very last, of course, is the Taliban are not free of not being dependent. They're totally dependent on US money, the 40-something million dollars a week that they have been paid, and a lot of other things. What's also interesting is, if you haven't read this book, please do take a look at it, Funding the Enemy. What the empires, by invitation, or empires of trust do is they're not only supporting their friends, they support their enemies also. US needs strong enemies, powerful enemies. Powerful countries don't fight little kids, you don't kick them on the road. You have to show them it's big and important, and even give them money and weapons. This book documents essentially how United States actually supported their enemies in the war. What has all of this produced in terms of our political culture? Political culture of violence. All political successions in Afghanistan have been fascinatingly violent. We have had 16 leaders in the country, and amongst the 16 things, 4 of them were violently assassinated or killed while in power. 7 of them were violently removed from power. 2 of those who were removed from power were also violently killed. We have had only 2 leaders who died natural death in their beds, Abdurrahman Khan and Mujaddidi. And 3 of them are still alive. So you look at this and you know what kind of a mess of a country we have been living in. And the reason is quite obvious. We have also had 9 constitutions in a little over 100 years. Constitutions are weaponized for centralization of power and for assuring those who are in power that they can have. Why should a country in 100 years have 9 constitutions? Everybody made their own constitutions for themselves to assure their rule. Not for the country, not for the nation. As Tom was referring to, if people were something that anybody was concerned with, then the constitutions should have been very different. These are weapons. In fact, I had read once a manuscript about Central Asia, which is lying with constitution. A lot of constitutions are lies in our part of the world. And of course, these, not that I'm saying that we don't need constitutions, we need them, but we need them slightly differently than we are. The other very important thing this has created is crisis of trust. Our society suffers from buhrani i'timad, in a worst form. And of course, the reason for that is tafawuq talabi, or essentially claiming greater rights by everybody. Every individual, every ethnic group, every family, whatever, they want more. They should have more than the other guys. And that's where the crisis of trust comes. Tazweer, again, instrumentalization of religion continues. And even democracy that came as an ideology or brought in as an ideology in the country has been also part of this deception part of Tazwir. It is not truly democracy. We haven't experienced it. We have had, obviously, elections and this and that, but that's part of the, again, game of deception in our society. The other very important thing, of course, is this oppression of women, gender, khushunati jinsiyati, which has been part and parcel of our family life. It's not something new. It's embedded in our families. Is a most important unit of social organization in society. We are leaving that, and we're talking about essentially woman. Woman is part of a family. That's unit, clearly an important one. Without man in that unit changing and understanding different kind of values, you're not going to change woman. Woman's status is not going to change. It doesn't matter how many NGOs you produce, how many projects you get. You have to change the family. And that's the product of this political culture for so long that has brought us to here. And ultimately, of course, the worst part of that is this extreme dependency on outside. Money, outside, everything. And that's going to be the vicious circle that has produced this dysfunctional political culture that we are grappling with. We need to change this cycle, this political culture. If we don't, there is no hope of either woman becoming somebody with its own right, or man, or anybody else in the country. So the political system also has produced a whole lot of horrible things that we have experienced, and that is autocratic rule, and it has introduced discrimination, nepotism, cronyism, corruption. All of these are part of a cultural, political culture that they need to be addressed. They need to be fixed. If we don't find solutions to these problems, we're not going to be able to do much of anything. The outcome of this has been we had a society that was different. It had different segments, linguistically, sectarian-wise, regionally, and so forth. These differences have been transformed into social fragmentation. Those social fragmentations have been now turned into violent factions that fight each other and produce violence. And that needs to be addressed. The worst thing is that we have not had a government that is sovereign, not in the history of this country that we're talking about. We have had hukumatoi ijarai wa hukumatoi kirai, leased governments. These are leased because, as earlier slides showed you, different forces have provided them with that. So when you have leased governments with power, they are not going to be able to need any authority. Authority comes from people empowering somebody. We have never had, because the governments have had the weapons they needed, the ideology they needed, everything else. So there has been no need for turning Taba'ai and Rayat into Shahrwand. Because of that, we don't have Shahrwand in Afghanistan. And that's what we're living with until now. They have also weaponized Islam and weaponized all ideologies, whether it was communism, socialism, or anything else. They are weapons in the hands of rulers, again, in collaboration with colonial powers, with imperial powers from the outside. And that's why much of what we don't have today is the reality. I wanted to just say this one quotation from de Tocqueville in Democracy in America. He had said, America took the state out of forcing or coercing public conformity to religion, okay? But not religion out of the public life. And what did they do for us in Afghanistan? They essentially empowered the Taliban to coerce and force religion on people in Afghanistan. And the process has been that religion has been taken out of our society. People are turning away from Islam. They don't want to have anything. If this is Islam, I don't want it. Forget it. The reverse of what Tocqueville said about America more than 100 years ago, in the 19th century. And we are brought to that point where our religion is forced upon us by shallaq every day. And of course, the reality is that. And I just wanted to say, if you haven't read Islamic Emirate of Afghanistan, the new book that is translated, this is Haqqani's book by Dr. Saleh, please read it. This is a manifesto of Taliban where they claim that Amir Haybatullah is Janishini Khuda. Can you imagine a Muslim saying that some leader is essentially a replacement for God, or is essentially representative on earth? Does God need a representation on earth? Or someone standing for him? The Quran says he is closer to us than our jugular vein. Does somebody who is closer to you than your jugular vein need somebody to represent them on earth? And if you don't obey, this book says, if you don't obey, then you are gunahgar. Where is Gunah is in front of God, not in front of some human being. Maybe according to their law, you will be a criminal, but you're not Gunahgar. Gunah is a very different concept. So where is this book? And it's being translated apparently by somebody named Lucian something. I just met him in Vienna. He's going to translate it from Arabic into English. So it'll be an eye-opener for the rest of the world to read. Where do they come from? And this is a government that has been imposed on us, and the power has been handed over by none other than the United States of America. This is the political economy of modern world that has created these dependencies in imperial ages, American empire, and European empire, Chinese empire, maybe soon in others, or essentially creating dependencies of small countries around the world, which we're not going to be able to kick easily out of our lives. And the technology of power that locals are using also is another enemy. We have to grapple with both of them. Shaking both of these things are not going to happen very easily, but we must have some vision of providing solutions to these problems of political culture. Otherwise, it's going to be a very difficult path indeed. And thank you very much.